The cold steel of the handcuffs bit into Corbin Vance's wrists as Officer Dunn shoved him against his own oak tree. Humiliation burned hotter than the afternoon sun as his neighbors watched him get arrested for the crime of watering his petunias while black. That single, degrading moment set in motion a chain of events that would see Corbin trade his university lectern for a police academy locker on a mission to dismantle the very system that had tried to break him. It's a story that forces us to ask if true change comes from tearing things down or from building something better from the inside. We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments as you listen, and if you find stories like this important, consider subscribing to our channel to help us share them. The Saturday had started with the simple, quiet joy that Dr. Corbin Vance, a tenured professor of sociology, cherished. The air was warm, the sky was a brilliant cloudless blue, and the scent of freshly cut grass hung over his suburban neighborhood. He was in his front yard, hose in hand, giving a gentle spray to the bed of petunias his wife Ilara had so carefully planted. It was a mundane act, a peaceful ritual that grounded him after a week of academic debates and student theses. He was humming, lost in thought about a lecture on community structures, when the police cruiser rolled to a silent stop at his curb. Corbin barely noticed it at first. Police cars were not an uncommon sight, and he had no reason to believe this one had anything to do with him. Then, the car door opened, and a stocky officer with a military-style haircut and a severe expression stepped out. This was Officer Dunn. "Got a call about a suspicious individual casing the neighborhood," Dunn announced, his voice carrying an immediate edge of accusation. He didn't ask a question. He made a statement. Corbin, momentarily confused, lowered the hose. "Officer, I think there's been a mistake," he said with a calm, practiced smile he used to put nervous students at ease. "I live here. This is my home." Dunn's eyes scanned Corbin, from his worn gardening shoes to his university sweatshirt, and a small, dismissive smirk played on his lips. "That's what they all say. Can I see some ID?" The request was standard, but the tone was anything but. It was laced with a disbelief so profound it felt like a physical slap. Corbin's smile tightened. "Of course, my wallet is just inside the front door. If you'll just let me—" He took a half-step toward his house. "Stay right where you are," Dunn commanded, his hand moving instinctively to the butt of his pistol. "Keep your hands where I can see them." The absurdity of the situation was starting to curdle into a cold knot of dread in Corbin's stomach. His neighbors were starting to notice. Mrs. Gable from 2 doors down paused her gardening, her expression a mixture of curiosity and concern. The Henderson kids stopped their game of catch across the street. "Officer, with all due respect, I am standing in my own front yard, watering my flowers," Corbin stated, his voice losing its easygoing tone, now firm and clear. "I am not a threat. You are on my property." Dunn seemed to take this as a personal challenge. "Your property? We'll see about that. You fit the description." "What description?" Corbin asked, his patience fraying. "A black male, late 30s, acting suspiciously." The words hung in the air, blunt and ugly. It was then that the front door opened and Ilara stepped out, a confused look on her face. "Corbin, what's going on?" She saw the officer, his aggressive stance, and her expression immediately shifted to one of alarm. "Is there a problem, officer?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. "Ma'am, please step back inside. We're conducting an investigation," Dunn said, never taking his eyes off Corbin. "Investigation? This is my husband. We own this house," Ilara insisted, her voice rising. Dunn ignored her. "I've asked you for ID, and you've refused to comply." "I didn't refuse," Corbin shot back, his frustration boiling over into anger. "I told you it was inside. I'm not legally required to carry it on my own property." That was his mistake. The challenge to Dunn's authority was the only excuse the officer needed. "You're resisting," Dunn declared. He moved forward with surprising speed, grabbing Corbin's arm and twisting it behind his back. The hose dropped from Corbin's hand, spilling water across the manicured lawn. The cold steel of the handcuffs bit into his wrists. As Dunn shoved him against the rough bark of his own oak tree, the humiliation was absolute. He was a respected academic, a husband, a homeowner, being treated like a common criminal for the entire world, his world, to see. Just then, a young man jogging down the street slowed to a stop. He was slim, sharply dressed for a run, and had an intense, intelligent look in his eyes. He watched the scene for a moment before approaching cautiously. "Excuse me, officer, Dr. Vance," he said, his voice hesitant but clear. Corbin turned his head, recognizing him immediately. Quentin Hayes, one of his brightest former students, now a recent law school graduate. "Quentin? What's happening here?" Quentin asked, directing his question to Dunn. "This man is my former professor. He lives here." Dunn glared at him. "This is official police business, son. Move along unless you want to be charged with obstruction." But Quentin stood his ground. "With all due respect, officer, you are arresting a man on his own property without cause. I'm a lawyer, and I'd strongly advise my client, Dr. Vance, to remain silent." Dunn laughed, a short, ugly bark. "Your client? You look like you're still in high school. He's not your client. He's my suspect, and now he's got a resisting arrest charge to go with trespassing." He yanked Corbin away from the tree and began marching him towards the patrol car. Alara was crying now, pleading with the officer. Quentin was trying to argue points of law to a man who clearly didn't care. Corbin felt a profound sense of futility. His knowledge, his status, his rights, none of it mattered. In that moment, he was just what Officer Dunn saw him as, a problem to be contained. The system had arrived at his front door, and his first attempt to reason with it had failed utterly. The night in the holding cell was the longest of Corbin's life. The smell of disinfectant and despair clung to the air. He sat on a cold, hard bench, the indignity of the arrest replaying in his mind. When Quentin finally secured his release on bail the next morning, Corbin walked out into the sunlight a different man. The world looked the same, but his place in it felt fragile, conditional. The legal battle that followed was a slow, grinding process that consumed their savings and their peace of mind. Quentin was brilliant and tireless, but they were up against an unmovable wall. The police union provided a top-tier lawyer for Officer Dunn, who filed a report filled with fabrications, claiming Corbin had been belligerent, had made threats, and that his refusal to provide ID was part of a pattern of non-compliance. The prosecutor, seeing a he said, she said case against a police officer, was inclined to believe the uniform. He offered Corbin a deal: plead guilty to a lesser misdemeanor, pay a fine, and it would all go away. "They want me to admit I did something wrong," Corbin said to Alara one night, staring at the legal papers spread across their dining table. "They want me to validate his actions." Alara, exhausted and scared, just wanted it to be over. "Maybe we should just take it, honey. We can't keep fighting this." But Corbin couldn't. It felt like a second, deeper kind of imprisonment. After months of motions and continuances, the prosecutor finally dropped the charges. There were no witnesses to corroborate Dunn's story, and Mrs. Gable had reluctantly told Quentin's investigator that Corbin had been nothing but calm until the officer laid hands on him. It was a victory, but it felt hollow. The charges were gone, but the humiliation remained. The financial cost was staggering, but the emotional toll was worse. Corbin found himself looking over his shoulder in his own neighborhood, feeling a phantom chill whenever a police car drove by. He tried to go back to his life, to his lectures and books, but the words felt meaningless. He was teaching theories of systemic injustice to privileged students in a safe, sterile classroom, while the reality of it was raw and visceral. He realized the true root of his despair wasn't just the arrest itself. It was the chilling efficiency of the system designed to protect Officer Dunn. It was a machine built to crush dissent, and he had been a meaningless cog caught in its gears. That was when the idea, terrifying and radical, began to form in his mind. One evening, he sat Alara down. "I'm quitting," he said quietly. She looked at him confused. "Quitting what? The university?" "Yes," he said, taking her hands. "I'm going to apply to the police academy." Alara stared at him as if he'd lost his mind. "What?" "Corbin, no. Why would you want to join them, after what they did to you?" "That's why," he explained. his voice filled with a conviction she hadn't heard since the arrest. "I can write articles and books for the rest of my life, Alara. I can teach 1,000 students about the problem, or I can get inside and try to be part of the solution. I can't fight the machine from the outside. It doesn't listen. I have to get in." She saw the fire in his eyes, the passion she had first fallen in love with, now forged into something harder, more focused. It was a terrifying leap of faith, but she knew her husband. When he set his mind to something, he was unstoppable. "Okay," she whispered, her fear mingling with a surge of pride. "Okay, we'll do it together." His acceptance letter to the City Police Academy was the first glimmer of hope, the first small win in a war he knew was just beginning. The academy was a culture shock. At 38, Corbin was a decade older than most of his fellow cadets, and his PhD in sociology made him an object of both suspicion and ridicule. The instructors, mostly grizzled veterans, saw his academic background as a liability. "You can't de-escalate a knife fight with a sociological theory, Vance," one of them sneered during a classroom session. He was Professor, the man who thought he was better than everyone else. He kept his head down, pushed his body to its physical limits on the obstacle course, and studied police procedure with the same intensity he had once applied to academic texts. The real antagonist, however, operated from the shadows. Officer Dunn, hearing through the grapevine that the professor he'd arrested was now a recruit, was both amused and incensed. He saw it as a personal insult. He still had friends at the academy, instructors who owed him favors. Corbin's training suddenly became much harder. His gear would go missing before inspections. He was assigned endless hours of guard duty. His test papers were graded with extreme prejudice. Dunn wanted him to quit, to fail, to prove that men like Corbin didn't belong. The major setback came during the final phase of training, scenario simulations. Corbin was partnered with a young aggressive cadet named Riggs, a known suck-up who idolized officers like Dunn. The scenario was a high-stress domestic disturbance call. They were supposed to work as a team to separate the couple, assess the threat, and de-escalate. Instead, Riggs went in hot, yelling commands, immediately escalating the situation. When Corbin tried to use his training to calm the husband, an actor playing the role, Riggs intentionally misinterpreted Corbin's calm approach as hesitation. "He's not complying, Vance. What are you waiting for?" Riggs yelled before tackling the actor to the ground. The supervising instructor, a close friend of Dunn's, failed them on the spot. "Vance, you froze," the instructor said, his voice dripping with false disappointment. "You let your partner handle it all. In the real world, that hesitation gets people killed." A review board was convened. Corbin was on the verge of being washed out, his dream turning to ash. He sat in his car that night, the academy manual on the passenger seat, and for the first time, he truly doubted himself. Maybe they were right. Maybe he was just a naive academic who couldn't handle the reality of the streets. Maybe the system wasn't just broken. Maybe it was unbreakable. But as he sat there, staring at the academy's motto etched on the cover, "To protect and to serve," he thought about the man he was on the day of his arrest, powerless, humiliated. He could quit now and return to a safe, comfortable life, or he could fight. He remembered Alara's unwavering support and Quentin's fierce belief in him. He walked into the review board meeting the next day, not with excuses, but with a plan. He calmly and respectfully broke down the scenario, citing specific procedural errors made by Riggs and explaining how his own approach was designed to lower the temperature as per their training. He wasn't just defending himself, he was teaching them. A few members of the board, ones not in Dunn's circle, were impressed by his articulate and logical breakdown. He was reinstated, but with a formal reprimand on his record. He had survived, but he was now marked. He graduated at the bottom of his class, not due to his scores, but due to politics. As he received his badge, he saw Dunn standing at the back of the auditorium, a look of pure contempt on his face. The war was far from over. Years passed. Officer Corbin Vance hit the streets and proved his old instructors wrong. He wasn't a hesitant academic, he was a different kind of cop. Where others saw suspects, he saw people. He used his deep understanding of community dynamics to build trust in neighborhoods that had long since given up on the police. He could talk a desperate man off a ledge, mediate a gang dispute, and comfort a lost child with equal skill. His arrest numbers weren't the highest, but the citizen complaints in his patrol zone dropped to nearly zero. He made sergeant, then lieutenant, not through backroom deals, but through sheer competence and the undeniable respect he commanded. His rise was quiet, steady, and it made the old guard nervous. All the while, Officer Dunn's career had stalled. His aggressive, old-school tactics were generating lawsuits the city could no longer afford to ignore. Complaints that were once buried in internal files were now being brought to light by a new generation of officers, many of whom had been mentored by Corbin. The final test arrived when the old chief of police announced his retirement. The city council was divided. The police union and the old guard pushed forward their candidate, a crony of Dunn's who promised a return to law and order. A progressive faction of the council, tired of the lawsuits and the broken community trust, urged Corbin to throw his hat in the ring. He was now Captain Vance, and his name was synonymous with integrity and reform. The battle for the position was fierce and political. Corbin's opponents dug up his past, trying to frame his wrongful arrest as proof of an anti-police bias. They used the reprimand from the academy to paint him as a failed cadet, but they had underestimated him. The climax came at a packed city council meeting. After his opponent gave a speech full of tough-on-crime rhetoric, it was Corbin's turn. He walked to the podium, not with a list of policy proposals, but with his story. 15 years ago, I was arrested, he began, his voice calm and steady, silencing the room. I was arrested for watering flowers in my own front yard. I was handcuffed and humiliated because the man with the badge saw my skin color before he saw a citizen. That experience could have made me hate the police. Instead, it made me want to serve. Because I believe in what the badge is supposed to stand for. He spoke of a new vision for the department, one built on trust, accountability, and the fundamental idea that justice isn't about the number of arrests, but about the feeling of safety a child has playing in their own neighborhood. When he finished, the room was silent for a moment, then erupted in applause. The vote was nearly unanimous. He was the new chief of police. On his first day, Chief Vance walked through the halls of the precinct, a place that had once been a source of his deepest humiliation. Officers, young and old, snapped to attention. He finally arrived at the desk of Senior Officer Patrick Dunn. Dunn, now gray and bitter, his ambitions long since faded, refused to meet his gaze. "Officer Dunn," Corbin said, his voice even. "My office, now." In the chief's spacious office, the one that now belonged to him, Corbin sat behind the large wooden desk. He gestured for Dunn to sit. He didn't raise his voice. He simply slid a thick file across the desk. "Your file, officer," Corbin said. 15 years of commendable service according to the official record, but the unofficial record, that tells a different story. He detailed every complaint, every lawsuit, every instance of excessive force that had been covered up. He ended with the fabricated report from 15 years ago. "You arrested me out of prejudice," Corbin stated, not as a question, but as a fact. "You lied in an official report. You tried to ruin my life and my career, not just mine at the academy, but those of any officer who didn't fit your narrow worldview." Dunn finally looked up, a mixture of fear and defiance in his eyes. "You can't fire me for that. The statute of limitations." "I'm not firing you for arresting me, Dunn," Chief Vance interrupted, his voice turning to ice. "I'm firing you because you are, and always have been, unfit to wear this uniform. You have violated the trust of the citizens you swore to protect. Your service is no longer required." With that, he stood up, the discussion over. A broken Dunn was escorted from the building. Chief Corbin Vance stood at his window, looking out over the city he was now sworn to protect. The fight was not over, but he had won the most important battle. He had become the change he wanted to see, and for the first time in a long time, he felt the quiet, simple joy of a man who is truly home. Do you believe one good person can truly change a broken system from the inside, or is the fight always bigger than the individual? Let us know your perspective on this in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please consider sharing it with someone you think needs to hear it, and be sure to subscribe for more narratives that explore the complexities of justice.